Hello, students, and welcome to week 3 of Dr. B. Amaya's IDS 300 Interdisciplinary Studies, class. We're a class. I typically don't like to use the camera, but I think it might help for you to see who I am, so I'll turn it on briefly and let you know I'm a real person on this end of the line. I wish I could see you guys as well. That would be very helpful. But anyway, I won't leave it on long, but I did want to say hello and let you know that I am indeed a real person. So today what we're going to look at in this video is an overview actually of the chapter. I don't normally do videos on the chapters because it tends to make students, not read the chapter. And I do want you to read the chapter. Because I point out some things in it, I worry that you're going to miss some other things that are really important. So I would like for you to read the chapter, but I'd also like to give you a brief overview of what I find important in the chapter. And so that's what we're going to do right here, right now. Chapter 3 is beginning the research process. Now, I have the textbook, and the one that I own is the 3rd edition. So I have the textbook open on my desk, and I'll use it to refer to page numbers. But the one that I'm recording here is the Kindle version. And there's a couple of things I like about the Kindle version. I thought I would point those out. First of all, it's typically less expensive. And you can also rent these. You don't have to just buy them. You can rent them, which is even less expensive than that. One of the pluses is that I can carry this with me wherever I go and access it on my iPad, my laptop, or even on my phone, which is difficult but doable. The other thing is, let me page through a couple of these, is that I can highlight in here. And I can also see what other people have highlighted, which is kind of interesting. This book doesn't have a lot of that in it. I also can place notes in here. And you'll see that as we go. And my final win is that I can search for something. If I type in Control F for find on my keyboard, I can type in a word. Let's try heuristic. That is in our... I have to spell it right. That's how it works. Okay, that's in our readings today, so let's take a look at that. And I can scroll through and see all the places that it's mentioned in the book, and I can kind of see some of the text surrounding it. So it's a really helpful thing to have to be able to search. You can't do that in a paper textbook. You can't do that in one that you've got holding in your hand. But I did want to point that out because I like it as a feature, but it's not for everybody. Okay, here we go, back to the book. Now, the only 3 things that it says are learning objectives here is to be able to describe the integrated model and to describe steps 1 and steps 2. So the integrated model, which is what they call their steps, I actually like to view as a framework. And this may be because I have a background in project management, and so I use a lot of the terminology that is used in that industry, a lot of the PMP, project management professional terminology. And one of those is the fact that it is a structured approach to looking at project management, and the structure is a framework. Integrated model, fine. If that's what they want to call it, that works for me. But you might hear me refer to it as a framework that we're going to build on all semester long. One of the things you're going to do this week in your assignments is to do a graphic that involves these 10 steps. And I just wanted to say, you can read about that in the homework assignment itself. I don't want to cover it here, but I did want to say, in case you're wondering why would I do that? Why would I make you do something that comes out looking like a piece of artwork? Well, a couple of reasons. Number 1 is if you have to put a little bit of work into it like that, you are going to remember these 10 items better because you're going to have to type them in, try to come up with images that represent them. You're going to have to do all kinds of things involving the 10, real quick, real easy, but you are going to have to engage with them, and that will help you remember them. Number 2 is you are going to be using all kinds of pieces and parts of your brain for this exercise. You're going to look at the color. Does it lay well on the page? Is the font size too big or too small? You're going to use all parts and areas and corners of your brain to do this. And again, the whole goal there is to help you connect to this 10-step process, this interdisciplinary research process. So just so you know, it was not just random me giving you out freebie points for this assignment, but rather I see it having value to you as a student and to me as an instructor. To you as a student, once you create this 10-step progress on a graphic like that, it will be your map for what you do for the rest of the semester. So it's going to help us both. Now, the paragraph I have highlighted here, the 10 steps clarify the points of decision or the operations, again, that's my framework, that are taken in any interdisciplinary research project. And it says, while those working in the softer social sciences and in the humanities may stress elements like intuition, creativity, and art, there are other parts of it. So it finishes up by saying it involves intuition and method. So one of those is a softer human side, and the method is a stronger or more stringent science side. So intuition and method, creativity and process, art and strategic decision making. I just want you to understand that you are going to approach your subject for your paper using all the skills that you have available to you. The next thing I have a note of is this. I liked this little statement, so I highlighted it, that all research uses some kind of method or strategy to approach a problem. I agree. The 10-step is not the only way. It is just a good one. And when you are new at something, like most of us are to interdisciplinary research, having some kind of a process to build on, some kind of a framework to build on is very helpful. As you become more adept at this, as you become more practiced and more experienced, you probably won't need to physically think through the 10-step framework. But these first few times, it's a great tool to use in order to make sure that you are developing a really solid paper. It starts out by talking about key characteristics, and the first sentence here says interdisciplinary research is a decision-making process that is heuristic, iterative, and reflexive. And then it goes through and it describes what each one of those terms means. Decision-making, you probably know what that means, but here, read the paragraph. It tells you how it ties in to what you're doing. Process-related, there are 3 steps that are identified that all applied research, it says, have in common. And I did want to point those out because they're good. Number 1 is that you're looking at a problem that is recognized as needing research. Yep. We're not going to pick any problems that are generic or have to do with you building a study in your uncle's backyard. That is not a problem that is recognized as needing research, so it won't make the cut. The second bullet is that this is a problem that is approached using a research strategy. Yes, we have a strategy, and yes, we're going to use it. And number 3, the problem is solved, or at least tentative solution is devised. We are not going to solve problems. That is not the intent of our major project here. So I did want to point that out because I don't want you to try to come up with a solution. We'll talk more later about what I do want you to do, but tentative solutions are nice, but I really want you to inform somebody about all the details of a topic, not solve a problem. Next is the heuristic. Again, read about that. In the world of project management, a heuristic is a rule of thumb. Here they've got a different description, so read it. Iterative, also a part of my project management training, and it just means that you come back and revisit something at different times. You don't just hit it once and move on. So iterative is important for you to understand. I'd like for you to look through that. There is a list here, and it is a list of bullets, and I point this out because I do want you to use this as you start developing your topic, but I may come back and do a reading reflection that has you actually write these up. And if so, it'll be, 3 weeks down the line or so, because you don't have topics yet. But basically, this asks some questions to make sure that you have gone through the proper due diligence in selecting a topic. So let's just visit a few of them over the topic that I'm thinking about doing on my example paper, which has to do with drones and parking lot surveillance. So number 1, the first bullet says, have I defined the problem too broadly or too narrowly? All right, if I focused on solving parking lot late night crime, that would be way too broad. I could not handle that, specifically in a short paper like this one's going to be, which is 1,500 words. That is way too broad. But what I'm looking at is the use of drones as parking lot surveillance to have a positive impact on crime. That is a lot narrower, and it is a nice boundary, I think. I may determine later that it's not right, but I think I have defined a problem that is just right. Not too broad, not too narrow. Number 2, have I correctly identified the parts of the problem? Oh my gosh, there's lots of parts to this problem. The question is, have I picked several to focus on? So I picked legal issues because I picked, is this even legal? Can this even be done legally? Do we have some kind of laws in place that allow for this? And the second issue I liked was whether the technology's there. Is there really enough technology that would allow drones to do this? And I had some feedback from some of you students that think, no, it's not. I have to tell you, I'm a big fan of spy novels, and in all my spy novels, the drones do amazing things, so I'm going to hold on until I start my research. I'm going to hope that I have chosen something that is doable. We'll see. The third issue that I looked at was, is this something that people want, students want? Or is this creepy? Or is this weird? Something I wouldn't want as a student. So that is me correctly identifying parts of the problem. And then the next one is identifying the disciplines. Well, mine actually fit into 3 disciplines. Legal, for is this legal? Social, for is this creepy or does this make sense? And technological, as can this technologically be accomplished. So that's how you would do this, going through these questions and applying them to your project and seeing if you have really scoped out a good project. Then there are 2 cautions down here concerning the steps. And the first caution is that some people want to avoid the difficult steps and jump to the later steps. And the authors say, don't do it. If you're at a difficult step, tackle the difficult step. I think that's great advice. If you need to go back to your textbook, if you need to do some more reading, studying, whatever, do it. Make sure that you do the step whenever it logically occurs so that you don't miss something important, because you don't want to get further into your paper and then realize that you have to go back and do a lot of rework because you missed something important. So try to use their advice and do these in the order that they're given. Now comes the other caution, which probably is going to seem like the reverse. And this caution is that the steps may give the impression that you do this, one, and then you finish one, and then you're ready to go on to step 2, and then you finish 2, and then you're ready to go on to step 3. Nope, doesn't work that way. These overlap. They loop back, they come back and revisit. Some cover tons of territory. For instance, step number 4 is conduct the literature research. I only have an idea in my mind, and I have already looked at some research. I'm on step 1. And I am looking at research. It makes perfect sense. It doesn't make sense for me to develop everything and then get to step 4 where I am supposed to conduct a literature research only to find out there is no literature on my topic. So be aware that I need you to do the steps as they come up, but you are going to do some steps over and over. You're going to do some steps at the same time as you're doing others. They don't stand alone. They do overlay each other. So just keep that in mind as you move through. All right, so now we're through with kind of the overview of the steps. And again, you won't understand them more completely until we cover them. So let's cover steps 1 and 2. Number 1 is define the problem or state the question. And it has several parts. It's broken up. You can see throughout the chapter this will happen. They'll list the 10 and then they'll list under them like subtopics to follow. So we have 4 that we're going to follow on number 1, defining the problem. And the first thing they talk about is select the problem or pose a question, but make sure that whenever you select your problem, it is complex. And how do we know whether it's complex? It's complex enough if it covers more than one discipline. If it requires insights from more than one discipline, and for our projects, I want them to be 3. If it is complex enough to involve insight from 3 disciplines, then it is perfect for our project. So those are the 2. Make sure it's complex. And then the second part of this was make sure it's researchable. And what that means is make sure there's research on it. Don't pick something that you just thought up that there are no literature reviews. You've got to refer to experts in this kind of research. So you need to do that. And again, my little note here, when I pop over it, it says, for this class, the major project must use 3, preferable, or 4 disciplines. So just a reminder that even though the book keeps mentioning 2, I want you to try for 3. The next part of that subset is to define the scope of the problem. And scope is 2 things. It's not what is included. It's also what is excluded. So sometimes your papers won't even make reference to what's not being covered. But occasionally, you will need to make a statement in your paper that says something along those lines. For example, if you're doing a problem of hunger in the U.S., you might have a statement in your paper that says something like, I know that this problem has some significant financial implications to our nation's government, but those are not the focus of this paper, and so I will not be visiting those topics, even though I recognize they are important. So again, the purpose there was to tell your reader that you are excluding that topic from your paper because you're trying to focus on some other items. So scope is about thinking through and sometimes making a statement about what is included and what is excluded in your research. The next step says you're going to avoid 3 tendencies. And I'm going to watch for these, and there's one that will happen in our class, I know. One of these is disciplinary bias, and that is when somebody uses the terminology and the structure and the methodology that clearly lets me know that they are favoring one discipline here. The next one, I'll put those 2 together. The next one is disciplinary jargon. And that's kind of the same thing. It's using language, it's using words, it's using technical terms and concepts that really belong to a specific discipline, not to the general public. Some terminology that you are used to seeing in the discipline. So I want you to avoid those. Disciplinary bias and disciplinary jargon don't belong in your paper. The last one, though, we will see. It just happens. Actually, I'm going to let you all know that you do have some personal biases, and you are going to need to be aware of that and work on leaving those out of your paper. Knowing it's going to happen helps because it helps you be aware and to catch it when it happens and to stop it before it gets too far. But personal bias is your own point of view when you start telling about this problem, and that would be using words like this atrocious method of whatever, or this unreasonable focus on atrocious and unreasonable. Those are reflections of how you feel about it, not what the research shows. So you need to focus on the research, not on your personal biases. Just watch for that to happen, and I'll help you out as I notice it as we go through the semester as well. All right, and then there are 3 guidelines for stating the problem. These are good. That's why I've highlighted them. Number 1, make it clear and concise. You saw that in my assignment from last week where I ramble on about my drones and my parking lot. None of that is going to make it in my research paper. That is me telling a story about what I'm thinking, about why I'm considering this. None of that belongs in my research. That is personal opinion. But also, it's rambling. It goes on and on. I need to find a way to state this clearly and concisely. It has to be clear and concise. It has to be sufficiently narrow. Again, I'm not going to choose a topic of solving world hunger, because I can't solve world hunger in 1,500 words. Not going to work. So make sure that the topic you pick is sufficiently narrow. And the third thing is the problem should appear in a context that explains why it's important. Typically, what that really means is put this at the beginning of your paper. When you write your essays, a lot of times, most of the time, you are saving the punchline for the end. You are saving your main point for the very end or somewhere near the end for that critical point in your paper when everybody goes, oh, wow. We don't do that in this kind of research. Right up front, this is more like a newspaper does it. Right up front, you're going to state what your research covers. Then you're going to spend the body of your paper detailing where your information comes from, all the research that you've done, and then you'll finish up with a short paragraph that concludes your topic, concludes your research topic altogether. So it's a step 1, 2, 3, but you want right up front to say, this is an important problem because. All right, and there are some examples in the book that follow that. This first example from the natural sciences does some of the things I don't want to see in our paper. It starts off, to a Pacific Northwest journalist such as myself, the river was inescapable as a subject. It goes on, many of the people I encountered, and so it is from his perspective. This is a book. This is a book that he wrote talking about dams on the Columbia River system, not the approach we want for our research paper. This is just an example of an interdisciplinary problem and how it gets introduced. The next one, I think, a couple of these are good and they would fit into a research paper. So just be sure and read those and again, focus on the interdisciplinary aspect of them. All right, then we get down to step 2. Step 2 is justify using an interdisciplinary approach. So I have picked something I think that's going to work, and now I need to go through these 4 little sub-steps and make sure that what I've chosen is correct. So the first thing is determining that the problem is complex. And we've already talked about that a little bit, but read this section. It's very good. Determine that the insights needed to talk about this problem in depth and in detail, that those insights come from 3 or 4 disciplines. And the last one here, or the next to the last one, is determine that not one discipline has been able to solve the problem, explain the problem, or resolve it, whatever. So you have to make sure it's not something that's already been solved. And the last one is the tricky one, especially for mine. I've got to figure out a way to make sure that mine looks like it is a need by society, not just a need by me. So you've got to determine that the problem is truly a society need that has not been resolved yet. That's the approach you need to take in order to justify your research. More examples come here. We get to the chapter summary, and then we get to the end. So that's basically what I want you to go through this week as you're looking at the chapter. And in the back of your mind, think about what kind of a project you would like to work on, because that is coming so quick. The other thing is, the quicker that you choose that, the quicker that you put that in your mind as you begin reading and doing more research, doing more study of how the process works, but then going and trying the process out on real articles, real items, the better you're going to write your paper, because you're going to understand from the very beginning how these theories apply to your practical pursuit of writing a good paper. Whew. I'm hoping that this was helpful, and we will see you again next week when we look at Chapter 4. Best of luck with your assignments this week. You have 2 of them, both short, so you should be able to knock them out easy. And I'll talk to you again soon. Thank you.